Welcome to the WTR Small Cap Spotlight podcast. I'm your host, Tim Gerdeman, Vice Chair and Co-founder and Chief Marketing Officer of Water Tower Research. In today's podcast episode, I'm being joined by John Pasalacqua, CEO of First Phosphate, OTC ticker symbol FRSPF, and Canadian Stock Exchange ticker symbol PHOS. First Phosphate is developing a high-purity phosphate resource in Canada to provide a secure and scalable supply of phosphate and cathode active materials to the growing non-Chinese LFP battery industry. Also joining is my WTR equity research colleague, Dmitry Silversteyn. Good morning, gentlemen, and thanks for joining me.
Yeah, hi, Tim. Good to be here.
Good morning, Tim. Good to be here.
John, good to have you back on the podcast, and I do have to kick things off by asking the following. With all the recent news regarding the impact of the conflict in the Middle East on various chemicals and related materials either manufactured and or shipped from or through the region, including fertilizers and phosphate more specifically, one thing that caught my eye was the recent announcement by one of the largest gold miners in the world regarding their intended acquisition of a phosphate resource in Canada. It seems that Avenir's proposed acquisition of Fox River has drawn renewed attention to Canadian phosphate assets. From your perspective, what does that transaction signal about growing strategic interest in phosphate within North America's electrification and supply chain build-out?
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Thanks for that. So in North America, there are three igneous phosphate projects. One is a carbonatite, which is the one that was acquired, and then the two are igneous anorthosites, which are likely the cleaner ones for electrification. Now, Avenir Minerals that made the acquisition of Fox River Resources as a subsidiary of Agnico Eagle. It was started last year, about October, to invest in critical minerals to diversify out the miner a little bit. And since then, they've made a few acquisitions of 5-10% in various minerals, but this was a really big departure. They bought the entire company. They bought Fox River Resources for about 95 million Canadian dollars, and now they own an igneous carbonatite type asset in Ontario. It's geared primarily towards fertilizer, but in their press release they discussed that they'd like to try it out for LFP batteries, and so that's going to be interesting. It's a little bit of a question mark. The carbonatites are very clean, but they can include lots of metals and rare earths in there, so we'll see how far they get in terms of purification up to LFP. But nonetheless, we welcome Agnico Eagle into the igneous phosphate space. We think it's a great validator for the space. And it's very interesting. They're moving from gold, which is usually small, tight veins and high value add per ton, if you will, to something that's the exact opposite, right? It's like a bulky material, the phosphate, the igneous phosphate, and it's in fertilizer. It's it's an industrial mineral. It's completely different than a precious metal. So let's see what they're up to. We know Agnico Eagle to be a very smart operator, very astute in what they do, and we'll be looking here over the next few weeks and months to see what comes of it. Nonetheless, there remain now just two igneous anorthosite properties in Quebec. Obviously First Phosphate is the one that's uniquely geared towards LFP batteries. It's got the largest market cap, and it's got the real downstream, right? We've been able to make these LFP batteries, right? We've been able to translate our phosphate into high purity phosphoric acid. There's no problem, there's no question about it. It's an igneous anorthosite. It's extremely clean, and we've been able to develop the supply chain solution for North America in terms of landing a mine to market model here.
That's great background color that I appreciate you sharing with us. And Dmitry, I'll turn it over to you to ask a few questions.
Sure. Thanks, Tim. John, Fox River and your resource are both Canadian phosphate projects, as you mentioned. They appear to target somewhat different end markets and follow development strategies that are somewhat different. How would you describe the key differences between the two assets from a geology, infrastructure, and more importantly, the downstream positioning standpoint?
Yeah, good question. So Fox River, the Marche properties in Ontario, the province of Ontario. We're in the province of Quebec. Like I said, we are an igneous anorthosite. We've done all our metallurgy and separation and all our downstream. And, we've been able to create batteries that were fully tested and function just like any other regular LFP battery, bought out of Asia, meaning that all the processes and all the minerals that went into it are fully validated. So we've been able to sort out our mineralogy and our metallurgy, and strictly for LFP battery. We're not interested in fertilizer. The Marche project, obviously, I can't speak for the company itself, but from what I understand from some of their documentation, there was an early PFS in about 2008 that was just for the mine for making fertilizer grade phosphate, and then I think about 2022, 23 they came out with a downstream PEA that included the downstream components of it, but it was all geared towards fertilizer, right? And then I think around 25 or so, they did a little bit of testing, moving some of that processed phosphate into LFP battery grade phosphate that is a purified phosphoric acid. I think they had some good initial results on a portion of their production. So there is certainly also an LFP angle there, but it's mostly a fertilizer project, at least as far as it was conceived by the PEA. Now we at First Phosphate, we appreciate a fertilizer model together with an LFP model, but it's not at all what we do. We're singularly focused on high purity igneous phosphate, igneous anorthosite, the 1% purest in the world, but specifically for the LFP battery. We think it's just too much to be focused on, serving two masters. We think it's two very different industries, fertilizer and LFP, and we'd rather be focused 100% where the value add is, and where the big growth is going to be, and where the technology industry needs us, right? It's very, very different customer sets as well. So we're focused there where we think the value is, and we're in the rock that we think is the best position to be able to have not any surprises. We've worked it all out and can get us to high purity phosphate for LFP battery, and that's our igneous anorthosite property, Bégin La Marche, in Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean, Quebec.
Understood. To dive a little bit deeper into what you said, one of the themes investors are focusing on or should be focusing on is the distinction between what you mentioned, the fertilizer-oriented phosphate projects and the battery-grade phosphate supply chain, which is what you guys are pursuing. From investors' point of view, how important is that distinction when comparing First Phosphate strategy to a project like Fox River, which is mainly for fertilizers? There's a portion of it that can be converted to high purity PPA, but I don't think it's nearly as well positioned as yours. I'd be interested in your thoughts.
Yeah, like I said, Dmitry, I think all businesses have to have their reason to be. They have to have their focus. I believe in being extremely focused as a business. I think that's the only way we attain success. I think it's already very difficult to be focused just on the LFP battery industry. For me to be able to have to focus on fertilizer as well, I think that would be just way too much. I don't think you can serve both masters. But I think it's also very important, the fact that, First Phosphate, when we started the company in 2022, since then we've been completely focused on the LFP battery with no interest in fertilizer. So that means that all of our resources have gone into the downstream and building a full downstream supply chain. So I don't think you can be focused on building two of them, fertilizer and LFP, but for us it's just LFP, and all of our resources are here. We've been able to build up a tremendous IP, and I think it's the focus that does that. So, some investors might think a good diversification of being fertilizer and LFP at the same time, but I really don't think you can be. I think it's got to be one or the other. But I don't take away from anybody else, building on different business models. We've seen all kinds of things work in industry and not work, but I think focus is what works, and that's why we're focused on LFP battery.
That makes a lot of sense, John. Thank you. The Fox River transaction suggests, strategic buyers are or maybe increasingly looking at phosphate as a critical material tied to both food security, obviously, and electrification, which I think is an important point that people miss sometimes. Do you think the market is beginning to better appreciate the importance of battery-grade purified phosphoric acid within the LFP ecosystem?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a tremendous validator. That's why I said we welcome full-heartedly, Agnico Eagle moving into this business. If they're into gold, and gold is the top of the precious metal sort of stack. I mean, them coming into igneous phosphate, maybe they see igneous phosphate as the new gold of electrification. Certainly, 80% of the batteries now produced on planet Earth are LFP batteries. They're all coming out of China. China holds it as one of their key export markets. During the trade tensions in October of last year, China had threatened three things. One was rare earths. Two was microchip technology. Number three was LFP technology. To this date, certain grades of LFP powder and technology cannot be exported outside of China. Now, we have that full supply chain ready to be implemented here in North America from mine to market. So it's a really important key strategic concern, and it's a question of national security. So I could see a miner like Agnico Eagle, looking to new streams, and I could see them looking to igneous phosphate as being, one of the more important ones for electrification. So I think this is a tremendous validator. We know from Agnico Eagle that they're a very well thought out company. They move slowly when they make decisions. They make them for a reason. So as sort of off piste as this might seem for Agnico Eagle, there's got to be a big plan behind there. And let's see what they have planned. I'm really interested to see it.
So am I. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. So let's talk about your resource specifically, the Bégin Marche resource. It benefits from proximity to the hydroelectric power, road access, and the port. In your view, how meaningful are the infrastructure advantages when evaluating long-term project economics and development risks in this sector?
Yeah, look, they're everything, right? And this is where I think sometimes the gold mining mentality in North America can be detrimental. Everyone looks, when they're looking at gold, they look at, where's the biggest resource, right? But when you're looking at something like phosphate, it's not necessarily the biggest and the best resource. I'm not saying that Bégin Marche is a fantastic resource, but what is more important about the Bégin Marche than far beyond its great purity and its great continuity is the fact that it's located beside infrastructure. When you're moving phosphate at $300-400 US a ton versus gold that could be 4,500 tons an ounce, right? $4,500 an ounce. It's a big departure in terms of value for the mass that needs to be delivered or moved. So it's really important that you need to be beside critical infrastructure. It's almost like having a gravel quarry. You can't have a gravel quarry 300-400 kilometers from port. So we're sitting at 70 kilometers from the deep sea port of Saguenay. This phosphate generally moves by vessel across the world. So it's really important to be in tight at the port. The other thing is, we've got an open pit mine. We're very close to roadway, like a kilometer from major, provincial, like state highways. We're very close to the electricity grid. We're very close to a workforce. We don't have any new major infrastructure to build. Like all that keeps your capex low, and we have a good project that is like like a medium-sized mine. It's human. It's bite-sized. The capex is not exorbitant. We get into production, mine and concentrator and everything with under 500 million USD. So all that's very, very important. It makes for a project that's bite-sized and that banks and governments and off-takers and the company itself can put into production fairly quickly. And we're looking at a 2029 production date, which is extremely aggressive. But we feel that the quicker that these deposits or these critical mineral deposits are put into production, the more that they'll be worth.
Understood. Understood. So continuing in that vein, you recently published your infill drilling results, which demonstrated a broad continuous mineralization across multiple zones of your project. Even though you call it a mid-sized project, it does seem to be pretty impressive looking at the drill results. As you advance the ongoing 30,000 meter drill campaign, what milestones should investors be watching out for in the next, let's say, 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, so Dmitry, we were supposed to do a 30,000 meter drill program. We've gone up to 40,000 meters. We're now in the process of sort of calculating all those results. So the main purpose of the drill campaign was to move resources from inferred and indicated up to indicated and measured, which is the basis for a feasibility study, and to prove out the continuity. So the continuity we feel is there. We've already announced that in our last press release. Now the next step for us is the mineral resource estimate in the coming weeks, which will tell us exactly what we have in terms of inferred and indicated and measured resources, and then put us in a position where our board can make a decision to move into feasibility study. Our feasibility study, if all goes well, we've targeted for December of this year, the end of December. We've got all the internal and external consultants ready to go, and then we're looking at permitting in 2027, as well as building out the capital stack by end of 2027. Build out in 2028 and having an operating mine in 2029 to meet definitive bankable and prepaid offtake that we already have in place.
Understood. And so far, it seems that you are hitting your goals and milestones in the manner that you've indicated. So that should be good for investors as they look forward. Last question for me. Do you believe that Fox River transaction could ultimately help narrow the valuation gap between First Phosphate and other North American strategic mineral developers, particularly as First Phosphate continues to advance its LFP-focused supply chain strategy? In other words, people still think of phosphate, when I say phosphate, you think fertilizer type of thing, but clearly it is not. And with all the news coming out here and the advances that you're making in your own projects, do you see this eventually moving phosphate into that category of critical minerals and therefore moving the first phosphate stock valuation wise closer to what other critical metals companies may be enjoying?
Yeah, very good question. I think it's clear worldwide that lithium iron phosphate batteries are now 80% of all the batteries in the world. What people seem to be coming to grips with is the fact that inside the cathode of the LFP battery, 4% is lithium, but over 60% is phosphate. So whether they believe that phosphate is a critical mineral or not, it truly is. Just recently in the Parliament of Canada, they put phosphate on the list of A minerals for electrification, and they specifically said in the Parliament, look, this is no longer about agriculture. There's a company in Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean, Quebec, i.e. yours truly, First Phosphate, without mentioning our name, that is 100% dedicated towards phosphate for the LFP battery industry. And I believe that we're the only company out there that's 100% dedicated to the LFP battery. All others are talking fertilizer and perhaps shifting part of their production LFP. I don't know how deeply they truly understand how focused you really need to be on this industry, but we're the only ones out there in phosphate for electrification. Yeah, I think we are re-rating. In the last 20, 30 days since the memo came out on the acquisition of Fox River by Agnico Eagle, our market cap has traded up over $100 million, which is the whole cost of the acquisition of Fox River. So that's why we really thank Agnico Eagle for what they did coming into the space and validating the space. But there's a tremendous run to be had here, and I think it really illuminates the strategy that First Phosphate has really enunciated since the beginning, which is no fertilizer. We are here for the LFP battery. We're in the highest purity igneous rock. We've been able to get downstream and actually make batteries with our stock. Like, that really validates the whole stock, our mineralogy, our metallurgy. And I think you're right. I think the re-rating on the entire sector, partly due to what's going on in the Strait of Hormuz, but more so because of the electrification angle. And it takes a long time, you got to understand, for our industry analysts to catch on to this. I don't know why in the West we've been talking nickel manganese cobalt battery, and I think we'll be talking nickel manganese cobalt battery when it will be only 5% of batteries out there. It seems like we latch onto these trends and we just never update. It's really strange, but I think the smarter crowd is catching on to this. And there you go, First Phosphate. Where are you going to get the P and LFP? Here we are.
Got it. Got it. Thank you, John. Tim, I'm going to turn the call over back to you.
Thanks, Dmitry. And John, thanks for joining us again. Always good to catch up on First Phosphate. And I think investors will appreciate you differentiating a moment ago the difference between focusing on ag versus focusing on the battery materials, which are so critical going forward. So thanks again for your time.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. Have a great day.
Thank you for listening, and don't forget to subscribe, as well as visiting www.watertowerresearch.com to stay up to speed on the company's small cap written research reports, podcasts, fireside chats, industry-specific symposiums, and conference schedules. We will see you next time for another edition of the WTR Small Cap Spotlight podcast. Finally, a special thanks to the producer and editor of the podcast, Krista Fitzpatrick.